A sweeping presidential order with potential massive impact was issued by President Donald Trump on countering domestic terrorism and organized political violence. And the order could have a sweeping impact, not just on gangs or groups like Antifa, which are now designated as terrorists. This also includes all of the organizations involved in any way in far-left extremism or other organizations involved in labeling, to swatting, to threatening, to carrying out actual violence or riots or even just trespassing. I want to go in depth into this order, what it means, and its impact. I'm the Epoch Times senior investigative reporter Joshua Phillip, and you're listening to Crossroads. Back on the 25th of September, President Donald Trump issued a sweeping order. It's a memorandum issued to the Secretary of State, the Secretary of the Treasury, meaning the Director of the Finances, the Attorney General, and the Secretary of Homeland Security. Massive, right? It's called the National Security Presidential Memorandum, NSPM-7. And remember that name. Remember that name, because that name is going to go down in history. This is Donald Trump's equivalent to the Patriot Act, but it goes even further, actually. What this order does, it can potentially dismantle the entire institution behind far-left violence. Whether it's people funding it, like these big billionaires, whether it's the boots on the ground like Antifa, and every single person in between. This is the White House order from September 25th, and first let me show you what the justification Trump gives for it. After that, I'll go into some of what it actually means, because again, this could be sweeping, and this could also impact a huge number of people and a huge number of organizations. This is what the president says. The official White House document, Section 1, Domestic Terrorism and Organized Political Violence. It says this, quote, heinous assassinations and other acts of political violence in the United States have dramatically increased in recent years. Even in the aftermath of the horrifying assassination of Charlie Kirk, some individuals who adhered to the alleged shooter's ideology embraced and cheered this evil murder while actively encouraging more political violence. It says this was preceded by the 2024 assassination of a senior healthcare executive and the 2022 assassination attempt against Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. Two separate assassination attempts against my own life, President Trump, in less than 3 months took place during the 2024 presidential election cycle. And it says riots in Los Angeles and Portland, currently ongoing, reflect a more than 1,000% increase in attacks on U.S. immigration and customs enforcement ICE officers since January 21st, 2025, compared to the same period last year. Now, he notes that just yesterday at the time, a shooting targeting an ICE facility in Dallas resulted in multiple casualties. That was the incident where an individual opened fire in an ICE facility and actually killed 2 people who were being detained by ICE. Apparently was shooting at the ICE officers, hit the people they were detaining instead, and then killed himself. It says separate anti-police and criminal justice riots, quote unquote, have left many people dead and injured and inflicted over $2 billion in property damage nationwide. He's referring, of course, to the Black Lives Matter riots. And it adds, this political violence is not a series of isolated incidents and does not emerge organically, not by chance, not just people deciding to go out. It says this is organized. It says, quote, instead, it is a culmination of sophisticated, organized campaigns of targeted intimidation, radicalization, threats, and violence designed to silence opposing speech, limit political activity, change or direct policy outcomes, and prevent the functioning of a democratic society. A danger, a threat to the entire system of the United States, in other words. It says this, quote, a new law enforcement strategy that investigates all participants in these criminal and terrorist conspiracies, including the organized structures, networks, entities, organizations, funding structures, and predicate actions behind them, is required. And that's what this does. A new law enforcement strategy to investigate basically everyone, every participant, whether it is organizing, whether it's the conspiracy, the network, the entities, the organizations, the money behind it, carrying out the actions, all of this is now, as we speak, under investigation. Now, from there, it actually goes on to break down the actual strategies. And it says this, quote, "These campaigns often begin by isolating and dehumanizing specific targets to justify murder or other violent action against them. They do so through a variety of fora, including anonymous chat forums, in-person meetings like these Antifa meetings or these Communist Party meetings they have across the United States, social media, and even educational institutions." It says these campaigns then escalate to organizing doxing, which is where they find a person's identity online or elsewhere, post it online, post where their family members live, post their home addresses. It says where the private or identifying information of a target, such as a home address, phone numbers, or other personal information is exposed to the public, with the explicit intent of encouraging others to harass, intimidate, or violently assault them, suggesting again that people organize, target a person, dox them, and then use this as a form of terroristic threat. It says, as in the case of several ICE agents in Los Angeles being doxed, again, in California, for example, Gavin Newsom made it so all the agents have to now show their faces. What's the reason for that? It's so people can identify them and then dox them and then harass them. Trump says the goal of these campaigns can be to obstruct the operations of the federal government as well as aid and abet criminal activity the federal government is lawfully pursuing. It says these campaigns are coordinated and perpetrated by actors who have developed a comprehensive strategy to achieve specific policy goals through radicalization and violent intimidation. And that's important, by the way. Terrorism is actually defined as the use of radicalization, violence, and things like this as a tool for political action. And by stating this, what Trump is basically saying is the people involved with these campaigns may be engaged in terroristic activity, which is what this does, by the way. Now, that's actually huge. Basically, what this does, Trump is saying here that organizations swept up into this coordinated tactic include the use of chat forums, like maybe they're talking on Signal, or they're talking on WeChat or Discord, things currently under investigation, by the way. They have in-person meetings, again, these socialist training groups, maybe even big ones, maybe non-governmental organizations, NGOs, maybe even nonprofits, because oftentimes these organizations actually establish nonprofits for specific actions. It also involves social media, organizing, think Reddit, these Reddit pages where they do organize this. Reddit pages where there are, in fact, pages dedicated to these things, even some invite only. Groups and organizations on TikTok, groups and organizations on Twitch, which is being called out for also fomenting radicalization, things like that. It also mentions educational institutions, and I would assume that means college campuses. That could also include college professors, because as we have seen, some of the unmasked members of Antifa, it turns out they're college professors. Sometimes it's people actually living on the campuses, even sometimes not even students, but still living on college campuses and then using their residence as a location to organize students against the United States or to organize them to protest on key policy issues. Now, it also notes these campaigns are being coordinated. This is not grassroots. This is not just people, students deciding, hey, let's go protest something. There's a system behind it. There's somebody behind it or organizations behind it saying, hey, we want to achieve these key policy issues, organize it, make it look grassroots. And the people behind it have actually developed a strategy that is, in fact, meant to radicalize people into this movement. And they also use violence very openly as a form of intimidation. Again, using violence for that purpose does represent terrorism. Now, it actually goes further than this. Here's what it says. Back to the document. It says there are common recurrent motivations and indicia uniting this pattern of violence and terroristic activity under the umbrella of self-described, quote, anti-fascist fascism. And that's important because it's pointing directly to Antifa in this regard and any organization involved with that. Now, who's using that, right? Of course, we look at Antifa and the various offshoots, like Trans-Tifa and all these things. But even the media is doing this. Even political organizations are doing this. The labeling of political enemies as fascist and the organization of movements against the people they labeled into violent movements oftentimes, or mass protests under the banner of fighting quote-unquote fascism, which is not actually fascism. It's just a tool they use and a label. Now it says this: these movements portray foundational American principles. For example, support for law enforcement and border patrol, or border control in this case, as fascist, to justify and encourage acts of violent revolution. So they label ICE officers as fascists as a way to destroy ICE. And there are people who become radicalized to the point where they fire their guns and kill people because they've been radicalized on that front. They label people like Charlie Kirk as fascists or extremists. Many organizations even labeled him that way. And then what happens? Some crazy guy radicalized by these narratives kills him. It says this, quote, "This anti-fascist lie has become the organizing rallying cry used by domestic terrorists to wage a violent assault against democratic institutions, constitutional rights, and fundamental American liberties." And this is an important point because some people would say, well, Jesus, Trump going after people, exercising their constitutional rights. Don't we have the right to freedom of speech? Is there not right to freedom of the press? Don't we have the right to, again, protest? What Trump is suggesting here is, yes, you do. But what these movements represent is a systematic, again, policy, organization, structure, planning with the intent of shutting down the constitutional rights of others. They're shutting down free speech. They're censoring conservative news outlets. They're getting people booted off or defunded on different platforms like, YouTube or other social media. They're using this to label people, target people, take away their advertisers. They're using it to foment violence, protests with the intent of making them too afraid to talk, too afraid to go out and speak, too afraid to go to a college campus and do a public speaking event because you might get killed like Charlie Kirk just got killed for doing that. Or you might be too afraid to go and speak because Antifa goes out and beats up your supporters, which we've seen over and over and over again. This is the reason why a lot of conservatives have to have armed guards when they go and speak at events, because people organize violent movements against them. Now it says this, back to it. Common threads animating this violent conduct include anti-Americanism, anti-capitalism, and anti-Christianity. Support for the overthrow of the United States government. Many of these organizations do state that. In fact, a lot of the movements do have various narratives on that. Whether it's, for example, the anti-ICE movements talking about, La Raza and the establishment of a new government opposing the United States within the United States. Whether it's, for example, the defund the police movements or things like that. It also involves, it says, extremism on migration, race, and gender, DEI policies basically, and hostility towards those who hold traditional American views of family, religion, and morality. If you don't agree with their values, they attack you. If you don't agree with their sexual beliefs, they attack you. If you don't agree with everything they say, they label you, they try to destroy your life, and if you dare speak out about it, they attack you. It says this, quote, "As described in the order of September 22nd, 2025, this was the earlier one just a few days before this, that's the designating Antifa as a domestic terrorist organization. It says the groups and entities that perpetuate this extremism have created a movement that embraces and elevates violence to achieve policy outcomes, including justifying additional assassinations." In other words, they're acting in terroristic cause. It says, for example, Charlie Kirk's alleged assassin engraved the bullets used in the murder with so-called anti-fascist rhetoric. Some people have challenged that. Many people, such as Andy No, who've been researching Antifa for years and years, have noted The language the alleged assassin used, writing on these bullets, is basically only used within Antifa circles, suggesting the individual is well versed within their ideas and within their narratives, this whole, bella canto type thing. It's basically saying here that the messaging does in fact align with the language used by terroristic groups. And it says the United States requires a national strategy to investigate and disrupt networks, entities, and organizations that foment political violence so that law enforcement can intervene in criminal conspiracies before they result in political acts. And what does that mean? It means, of course, pre-crime. It means treating them like terrorists. It means that they might not have committed a crime yet, but they're planning to. And you can dismantle the networks before there is an act of political violence. It says, quote, through this comprehensive strategy, law enforcement will, this is will, not might, will disband and uproot networks, entities, and organizations that promote organized violence, violent intimidation, conspiracies against rights, that's a major crime, by the way, and other efforts to disrupt the functioning of a democratic society. That is massive. That is massive. What Donald Trump is saying here, and look, this is not just talk. This isn't him writing it on Truth Social. This is an actual order. This is currently, as we speak, being carried out. This is real. This is the official White House guidelines on it. This is what he sent to the Treasury Department, the Homeland Security Department, the Attorney General. As we speak, this is what is happening. Every single person, every single organization, every single NGO, every single movement, and we'll see how broad it ends up being, anybody involved with this in any way is now being targeted as a form of intervention in a conspiracy, meaning they're working in cahoots with each other, and they're going to dismantle the entire network, disband and uproot networks, entities, and organizations, get rid of all of them, go after them, charge them, investigate them. Anybody who, quote, promotes organized violence, violent intimidation, conspiracies against rights, meaning they're shutting down free speech, making people afraid to speak out, targeting people, labeling people. Think the organizations that were labeling groups like evangelical Christians as extremists, or labeling Charlie Kirk and Turning Point as extremists, and there are a lot of them that did that. And other efforts, meaning that's a broad interpretation, other efforts. Think Antifa, think BLM, think all of them, to disrupt the functioning of a democratic society. Now, like from there, it actually gets especially interesting. It doesn't even end there, okay? From there, this order, again, this is real. This is being carried out as we speak. From there, it gets into the actual actions that are now going to be carried out by federal agencies. Because let me show you what it actually says it's going to do. This is Section 2 of that document from the White House, and it says this: investigating domestic terrorist organizations, A, the National Joint Terrorism Task Force and its local offices, collectively the JTTFs, shall coordinate and supervise a comprehensive national strategy to investigate, prosecute, and disrupt entities and individuals engaged in acts of political violence and intimidation designed to suppress lawful political activity or obstruct the rule of law. It says this strategy shall include the investigatory and prosecutorial measures set forth in this section. This is what it says. B, the JTTFs shall investigate potential federal crimes relating to acts of recruiting and radicalizing persons for the purpose of 1, political violence, terrorism, or conspiracy against rights, meaning you're trying to infringe upon the rights of Americans, the right to believe. If you're a Christian and you express your views on marriage or sexuality and you've been attacked by it, a conspiracy against that could actually be targeted. Someone trying to stop you from having your belief. Anything of that sort. Someone trying to intimidate you, political violence, going after you for wearing the hat of your favorite political party. Anybody organizing to target you for doing that could actually be now investigated as a terrorist. It says, or the violent deprivation of any citizen's rights. That's broad. That's broad. Any citizen's rights. If they use violence to deprive you of any right, they could be labeled under this whole thing and investigated. The weight of this, the extent of this, the scale of this cannot be understated. It doesn't even end there. It then directs the National Joint Terrorism Task Force and its local offices to investigate all of these. Let me show you. The White House, 1, institutional and individual funders, people giving money to it. Anybody who's donated to these organizations, anybody who's given money to them, whether it's big donors or little donors, all of them now are under investigation. Officers and employees of organizations, the people leading them, and even the people working for them, that are responsible for, sponsor, maybe an advertiser even, or otherwise aid and abet, if you've helped them in any way, the principal actors engaging in the criminal conduct described in subsection A and B of this section. So anyone who has funded, advertised with, worked for, helped in any way, any of these organizations could now be swept up in this. That's how broad this is. Let that sink in. It even says this, 2, non-governmental organizations and American citizens residing abroad or with close ties to foreign governments, agents, citizens, foundations, or influence networks engaged in violations of the Foreign Agents Registration Act or money laundering by funding, creating, or supporting entities that engage in activities that support or encourage domestic terrorism. That's a lot of organizations. So if an organization gets foreign money, if an organization has foreign ties, if an organization has an international element to it, even if they're involved in NGOs, it's an NGO registered and they're involved in any way with China or Iran or anything of that sort, or even, again, many of these Antifa groups have international bodies, all of them, every organization and that entire structure could now be investigated. All of them. After that, it says this, D, the JTTF, the Joint Terrorism Task Force, shall consult and coordinate with executive departments and agencies as needed to determine whether such agencies can apply existing authorities or exercise their own authorities as appropriate to support the JTTF's investigations and relevant prosecutions of political violence. Meaning, it's not even limited to just the JTTFs, right? They have a lot of power in and of themselves. They can actually mobilize, whether it's like, I don't know, the National Guard or FBI or who knows what else. They can actually reach beyond their organizations into other ones to carry this out. That is giving them huge power. Then it says the JTTFs may, to the extent permitted by law, request operational assistance from and coordinate with law enforcement partners when investigating domestic terrorism. It doesn't stipulate whether local or federal. So this could be FBI, it could be local police. Then it says the National Joint Terrorism Task Force shall provide regular progress updates to the President through the Assistant to the President and Homeland Security Advisor. They're going to be talking directly with Trump on this, giving updates on the progress of doing this and talking to members of Homeland Security at the top levels. Trump is directly involved with this. And then it gives orders to the Attorney General. Here's what it says for the Attorney General. It says, the Attorney General shall direct the Department of Justice to prosecute all federal crimes to the maximum extent possible by law, permissible by law, related to the investigations described in subsections A through C of this section. Meaning, again, these are going to be federal charges, not local charges, and maximum extent possible. Maximum charges possible. They're going to be bringing through the Justice Department. It says the Attorney General shall issue specific guidance that ensures domestic terrorism priorities include politically motivated terrorist acts such as organizing doxing campaigns, swatting, rioting, looting, trespass, assault, destruction of property, threats of violence, and civil disorder. So they're going to be going after everybody involved with this. If you've been involved in doxing people, revealing their identities online, posting their home addresses, saying, hey, this is where this person lives, if you've called the police department and had them swatted, if you've engaged in riots, if you've looted a store, think BLM and all the rioting, if you have so much as trespassed, it says trespass, if you've assaulted anybody, if you've destroyed any property, and that could even be like defacing a statue or tearing down a statue or, I don't know, writing your name on a wall. If you've threatened violence, threatened anybody during this, or you've engaged in any form of civil disorder, you are now possibly going to be investigated as a terrorist. That's how broad this is. And charged to the maximum extent possible, and also hit with RICO, meaning your crime will not be limited to that one crime. Your crime will be racketeering tied in with every other individual with this. Every single one of you is going to be tied in with this potentially. It says this guidance shall also include an identification of any behaviors, fact patterns, recurrent motivations, or other indicia common to organizations and entities that coordinate these acts, and how to direct efforts to identify and prevent potential violent activity. Meaning, it's not even organizations directly involved. If any organization has shown like an indication that they may be doing this, they're also now under investigation. This is massive. The scale of this cannot be understated. And it doesn't even end there. It goes on. After this, it gives orders to the Secretary of the Treasury. They're going to be investigating through, again, finances and other things. This is the role the financial side is going to play. It says the Secretary of the Treasury, in coordination with the Attorney General, meaning, again, investigating crimes with money, and then recommending maximum charges possible through the AG, shall make available all resources to the maximum extent permitted by law, all the financial records, everything the Secretary of the Treasury would ever have any access to, all the financial documents, all the donors, everything. It says to identify and disrupt financial networks that fund domestic terrorism and political violence. Then it says, the Secretary, again under the Treasury, acting through the Terrorism and Financial Intelligence Office of the Department of the Treasury, investigated as terrorists, shall deploy investigative tools, examine financial flows, and coordinate with partner agencies to trace illicit funding streams. Why does that matter? If you're doing investigations like this under normal law, there are limits to it. If you're investigating it as a form of terrorism, because they're going through the Terrorism Financial Intelligence Office of the Department of the Treasury, they can investigate things where a crime has not yet been committed or they don't know one's being committed. They can actually investigate things they could not normally investigate. Basically, this gives them access to like probably everything. And then it says this, the Secretary of the Treasury shall provide guidance for financial institutions to file suspicious activity reports and investigate any indication of illicit funding streams to ensure such activity is rooted out at the source and referred for for law enforcement action as appropriate. So if they see any funny business anywhere, they're going to recommend them, flag it, hey, this is suspicious, and the Justice Department, because it's talking directly to the having the Treasury Department work with the Attorney General's office, who's working with the Justice Department. They're flagging it all for criminal investigation. They're going through everything now. Everything. All of it. Everything. Then it says this, the Commissioner of the IRS, right, the Internal Revenue Service, shall take action to ensure that no tax-exempt entities are directly or indirectly financing political violence or domestic terrorism. So if you're a nonprofit organization, if you're tax exempt, that could even be a religious organization, that could be an NGO. If they're directly or indirectly participating in any way, and remember how broad they frame this, organizing, doxing, labeling people, this guy's a fascist or whatever like that, they're potentially going to be investigated as terrorists. They are under complete investigation now. And it says, in addition, where applicable, the commissioner of the IRS shall ensure that the Internal Revenue Service refers such organizations and the employees and officers of such organizations, if you so much as work for an organization engaged in this, you are now going to be referred to the Department of Justice for investigation and possible prosecution. Those are the exact words. Every employee is going to be investigated and referred for prosecution if you so much as work for an organization involved with this. Doesn't matter if it's an NGO, a nonprofit, even a religious organization, anything tax exempt, it is under investigation. Look, after that, it goes even further. It goes into directives for every single one, all federal law enforcement agencies. That means FBI, that means marshals, that's all of them, every single one of them. And here's what it says for them. It says, quote, all federal law enforcement agencies with investigative authority shall question and interrogate, bringing in people, questioning them and interrogating them within all lawful authorities, individuals, anybody, engaged in political violence or lawlessness. And remember how broadly they frame that. If you've trespassed, if you've defaced a building, if you've engaged in any type of intimidation, if you have so much as doxed somebody, if you've labeled somebody, you could be called in and interrogated. Anything regarding the entity or individual, it says, organizing such actions and any related financial sponsorship of those actions prior to adjudication or initiation of a plea agreement. Meaning, they're going to investigate you, and then maybe you'll get a plea deal so you can go after the guy above you. Then it says, investigations should prioritize crimes such as the following: assaulting federal officers or employees or otherwise engaging in conduct prescribed by 18 U.S.C. 111. Conspiracy against rights, 18 U.S.C. 241. Conspiracy to commit offense, under 18 U.S.C. 371. Solicitation to commit a crime of violence, under 18 U.S.C. 373. Money laundering, under 18 U.S.C. 1956. Funding of terrorist acts or otherwise facilitating terrorism, under 18 U.S.C. 2339. And it goes on to a few other ones. Arson, like these guys throwing fireworks at police officers or firebombs or anything else. Offenses under 18 U.S.C. 844. Violations of the Racketeer Influence and Corrupt Organization Acts, RICO, meaning basically, if you are an employee of an organization and you just happen to work for them and they've been doing this, and that organization was tied in with these guys committing terrorism, you could be wrapped up into a RICO charge and charged with whatever this guy's being charged with. Right, RICO. It's RICO. That's massive. And RICO allows for really, really broad use of the law. RICO is almost like a gray area. RICO is if they investigate an entire network and one guy's committing a crime, they can take down the entire network. That's how broad this could be. And it says also major fraud against the United States under 18 U.S.C. 1031. They're investigating literally just about everything. Then it says this: all federal law enforcement agencies with investigative authority shall adopt strategies similar to those used to address violent crime and organized crime to disrupt and dismantle entire networks of criminal activity. What does that mean? Every organization involved in anti-ICE, every organization involved in Black Lives Matter, every organization involved with Antifa or any of its affiliates, any organization that is funded, any organization that has helped dox or label people, and there's a lot of them. The ACLU has done stuff like this. The Southern Poverty Law Center has done stuff like this. Major news organizations like the New York Times, they've done stuff like this. Major political figures have stated publicly that they are Antifa, have done things like this. Major political figures have stated, support for these people, organized it. There are reports of stand-down orders issued to police to protect people carrying out political violence. There are organizations involved with doxing, organizations engaged in training, organizations involved with funding, like the Tides Foundation, foreign groups involved with this, again, like this guy in Shanghai organizing funding for it. You have groups like the Chinese Progressive Association that have provided some forms of organization involved with this, tying into entire networks of Chinese front operations, organizing and involved with this. You also have groups like the cartels and gang members, think Tren de Aragua and MS-13, that have been involved with some of these acts as well. You have assassination networks tied in with this. Remember, Iran had some networks that were uprooted. You have cartels engaged with this. This basically ties them all together. It takes all of them, bundles them up, ties a little rope around them, and says, you're all guilty. That's what this does. It's RICO. It's RICO. They're all tied together now. The weight of this, the extent of this, the scale of this, is something I don't think we've ever seen in this country. We have never seen anything like this that I can even think of. We can talk about the Patriot Act. This is above and beyond anything like that. If McCarthy could rise from his grave and say, hey, where are the communists? And he'd look at this, he'd be like, guys, it's kind of... it's going pretty far. This is everything. Well, I should restate that. This is what McCarthy dreamed would happen. This is basically every single radical organization, every single communist organization, every single group with foreign influence. This could potentially, if they do it, take down the entire united front of the Chinese Communist Party, if they choose to. This could do that. And it goes on top of other things, because look, already, President Trump has in fact designated cartels, terrorists, gangs like MS-13 and Tren de Aragua as terrorists. More recently, Antifa as terrorists. That's a lot of organizations tied in behind them. This could vastly, massively expand the number of organizations and individuals designated as terrorists. They could be called terrorists, hit with RICO charges, and everybody related to them in any way who's been involved, even a drop, could go down with them. Because here's what else it says. It doesn't even end here. Section 3, Department of Justice designation. It says, in the course of and as a result of the investigations directed by Section 2 of this memorandum, the things we just went over, the Attorney General may, not saying he has to, but may, she may recommend that any group or entity whose members are engaged in activities meeting the definition of domestic terrorism under 18 U.S.C. 23315 merits designation as a domestic terrorist organization. Meaning, in the course of carrying out these investigations, if any group, if any entity has any member engaged in anything that meets the definition of domestic terrorism, it now merits their designation as a domestic terrorist organization. That's what Trump just did. It says as well, the Attorney General shall submit a list of such groups or entities to the President. This is going to go to the President of the United States. Trump is going to be the one to look at it, through the Assistant to the President and Homeland Security Advisor. And then it says, domestic terrorism as a national priority area, Section 4. It says the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, and the Secretary of Homeland Security shall designate domestic terrorism a national priority area and develop appropriate grant programs to allocate funding for law enforcement partners to detect, prevent, and protect against threats arising from this area. Meaning, aside from everything, they're also going to make a big budget and give it to law enforcement, and these law enforcement partners are going to be looking for terrorists, trying to prevent terrorism, meaning, of course, you're going to have surveillance and protecting against it, meaning if they see people organizing, discussing, planning, funding, protecting the public means intervening before something happens, they're going to probably arrest them. That's what this is saying. Now, the massive scope of this really cannot be overstated. I'm kind of shocked. Almost nobody's really been talking about this. Those of you watching this, how many of you have actually heard this all being laid out? How many of you have seen this actually discussed? This is huge. This makes the Patriot Act look like child's play. This makes the most extreme forms of like domestic terrorism investigations look like just peanuts. This could potentially pull in the entire machine of far-left organizations. It could be activist journalists. It could be non-governmental organizations. It could be college professors. It could be professional protesters. It could be billionaire funders, the big billionaires giving money to these organizations, oftentimes through tiers of organizations, all of which could be taken down, investigated, labeled, and prosecuted. It could include every single open, communist, and socialist organization or party in the entire United States or even foreign. And the vast number of organizations they've established and continue to establish, and then basically hit every single one of them with RICO charges because they work in conjunction with each other, and then use terrorist designations to expose and dismantle their entire operations. It's all wrapped up into this now. But even beyond this, I'd add this could even potentially be used, as I mentioned, to expose and unravel foreign operations. Something I've been working to expose my entire career as a journalist. Things like the United Front Work Department. There are organizations, foreign organizations, working to subvert the United States, working to infiltrate our government, working to control our politics, working to suppress people in the United States. I've been threatened by them. They've threatened to kill me. This has been happening for well over 2 decades. Nothing, almost nothing has been done against it. This could potentially take down that entire network. This could potentially uproot that entire system. Every person who has sold out to the United Front, every person engaged in the United Front, every person who has taken money from the United Front, every person who has worked for it, every person tied in with any Tong, any front organization, any movement, if you have worked for them, organized with them, partied with them, hung out with them, went on trips back to China with them, you could potentially, if they choose to investigate this as well, which I think they will, potentially be wrapped up into a RICO charge that could take down all of it. Because guess what? That also ties into other things. Foreign influence, including engagement with some of these movements we see on the streets of the United States. Engagement in Black Lives Matter. The United Front actually had ties to it. Engagement in Antifa. The United Front has some ties to it. There are members of Congress now noting that even the guy who assassinated Charlie Kirk, accused of it, may have had ties to the United Front of China. Anything involved in instability, plots against the United States, like those big farms he just found, those server farms, where they were having systems to call in swatting attacks against American elected officials. That was a Chinese Communist Party network. And guess what? They say that swatting is now something that will get you investigated as a terrorist. That was part of it. Crime, the CCP runs through the United Front. The Tongs, they're engaged with the drug cartels also because they're suppliers of fentanyl. They're the suppliers of precursor chemicals. They do the money laundering, drugs, threats of violence. They've threatened a lot of people. They've threatened me. Even the infiltration of major businesses and government agencies. all of it could be taken down by this. Now, we're going to have to see how far they actually go with it. We'll see how far they go. I can tell you, just the United Front would be tens of thousands. It would be tens of thousands of people if they wanted to take it down. If you wanted to go after even the periphery, it could be hundreds of thousands. If you wanted to go after the entire network, not just the United Front, the gangs, the cartels, the activist groups, the major organizations, the billionaire funders, even maybe working with foreign partners, because they even say foreign countries. How many countries does America work with on counterterrorism? How many organizations involved in those countries, part of these exact same networks? The takedown you're about to watch, if they go through with it, because they're saying they're going to do it, if they go through with it, could be basically the entire shutdown of a system of unconventional war against the United States. This could be finally the end, the destruction, the coming to terms, the prosecution, the final trial of every subversive movement that has been trying to target the United States, if they choose to do it. And they now say they're going to do it. This is massive. And that said, questions, comments, anything you want to talk about, leave it in the chat. Let's jump into a discussion. It's crazy, right? Look, how many of you have even heard about this? Like, have you heard any other media talk about this? Have any of you seen like a news report breaking this down? When I read this report, I could barely believe what I was reading. This is, I keep saying this is massive. I feel that we've misused the term massive until this point, because the term, there's no word to express how big this is. This is sweeping. This is sweeping. And I mean, you know, when Trump was talking about draining the swamp or whatever, this is it. If I were to advise him, what do you do against the systems and programs and United Front and all the things I've been saying? Look, we're going to lose our country if we don't do something about it. If I were to say, what do you do about it? It would be this, frankly. This would be the only way you could get rid of it. And we'll see what it means in practice. We'll see if they sweep up a lot of innocent people. We'll see if it gets abused. We'll see if it switches sides, if maybe the other side uses it. We'll see if Trump gets sued and the whole thing gets blocked, because that might also happen. But if those activist judges are tied in with it too, maybe they'll get swept up too. We'll see how far they go. But this is huge, huge. First question, California gal. You're saying once Democrats come back into power, would they be able to redefine terrorism and then go after their political opponents? Should we be concerned about this? I mean, that's the other side of it. You know, how should I say it? There's this saying, if you're going to shoot, don't miss, right? Trump, by doing this, has kind of crossed the Rubicon. I don't know if he can put the genie back in the bottle. Now, some would argue Trump didn't start this, the other side did, because during Biden's term in office, they were investigating evangelical Christians. They were labeling MAGA extremists. They were going after, they were saying devout Catholics were, extremists. They were basically, it turns out now, it's coming out, they were investigating conservative members of Congress who questioned the outcome of the elections. All of them were being investigated. And so you could, and look at how many people around Trump were being charged with RICO, were being charged with conspiracy against rights. Like, technically, they're kind of doing the same thing. You could say that Trump is taking it a lot further with this, and I think that's probably accurate. Trump basically is, you could say that he's using what was done under the previous administration, but this goes a lot further. He's taking it a lot further. Now, on that point, what does it mean for the next president who comes in? Could the other side use it? Yeah, I mean, that is concerning too. We don't know who the next president's going to be. And, look, once you let the genie out of the bottle, it's hard to put back in that bottle. This is kind of the crossing of the Rubicon. This is the crossing of the Rubicon. And if Trump fails to properly root out the networks that are acting against the United States, those networks acting against the United States, if they ever get power in the future, could use this against us. That's also possible too. So I don't know. I mean, we've seen it with the Patriot Act, right? I mentioned that a few times. All right, so I know I'm getting older now, I guess. I'm almost 41 now, right? I remember when George W. Bush, when George Bush Jr. did the Patriot Act. And the Patriot Act, of course, allowed for pre-crime, investigation as terrorists, networks and systems to investigate potential terrorism. And at the time, we were all like, great, Team America, go America. And a lot of us were like, you got to take down the terrorists. A lot of us were very patriotic about it. And, we saw that some of those powers were used to, past 4 years. Parents who went and protested at school board meetings, there were recommendations to investigate parents as terrorists. Is that what we had in mind as a terrorist? I don't think we did. But that's how broadly it was interpreted. So, it is true. I mean, that's a fair point. It could be used against Trump in the future, for all we know. So it is pretty serious. Denise B., you're saying, who will arrest whom first? California Police Department arresting ICE for wearing masks, or ICE arresting California Police Department for interfering with their work? LOL. Yeah, maybe it's going to be the race to see who can arrest who first. May the quickest draw with the handcuffs win. Right? So you're, tongue in cheek, of course. We are pointing out in California, Gavin Newsom has passed a law where federal agents can no longer cover their faces. So if ICE or National Guard, if they're deployed there, or federal marshals or anybody's deployed there, they can no longer cover their faces. And they've been saying they have to cover their faces because they're getting doxxed, they're getting threatened. Antifa, other groups are being given stand-down orders while they're attacking these people. And so police are being given stand-down orders to not protect federal agents when they're being attacked by these individuals. Their lives are in danger, and of course, it's being suggested that that's intentional because there are groups that do not want ICE to be able to do its job deporting people, and that this is how you do it. You make them afraid to go into towns. We'll see what happens with that. But if Trump moves forward with this, every person who is doxing, every person who's working with these groups, who's given the stand-down order saying, hey, police, you're not allowed to assist ICE. Hey, police, you're not allowed to intervene, or you're not allowed to react to a call for help from federal agents. They could get charged with this. And this is the other side of it too. I actually would add one part to it. Being charged in America does not mean you're guilty. If you get swept up into something and criminally charged and investigated and terrorized, and your life is thrown through the ringer and takes 10 years, 10 years down the road, it could be that you're innocent, you're not guilty, and the other side goes to jail. That's also totally possible. It could also be that they investigate everybody and the whole thing gets thrown out, at the end because a new president comes in. With Trump, that's what happened. They were investigating Trump, under the Biden administration, investigating Trump, investigating his allies, investigating his supporters. Trump gets elected. He pardons everyone. They end, Jack Smith's special counsel investigation. They end the whole thing. The RICO charges get tossed out, and the investigation switched to the other side. Maybe that's where we're at as a country. We'll have to see. Or it could just be that a prosecutor just says, I'm not going to bring charges. Good luck. You're not going to have it here. We also see that happening. So even though this is massive, it might result in nothing, right? Just being realistic, that is a possibility, but we'll have to see. I would imagine that Trump's taking that into consideration. But we'll have to see because we haven't really seen anything like this before. James Dyson, you're saying, is the left being squeezed into a space that is between a rock and a hard place, a sharp rock and a hard place with spikes? That's kind of what it is. Actually, I would say that the solution for the left is this, and it's kind of what I hope happens. It's not just the left. There is also I wouldn't call it the alt-right because that's been such a political name. There's like the woke right, as some people call it. There are organizations that are they are socialists who are on the right side too. There's not as many of them. But we see groups and we don't know what they are. Has anybody seen like Patriot Front, where those guys with like the blue and the gray and they have like shields that oddly look like Antifa shields? Has anybody noticed the similarities? And they go out and hold like neo-Nazi rally looking things. Or the guys with like the red and they have like swastikas. Like, who are those guys? Like, you have groups like that claim to be on the right, but I think most of the right doesn't trust them, and most people on the right call them feds and don't agree with them. And so those groups, although they're there, they don't really take root. They don't really penetrate. The problem the left has is that groups like Antifa, groups like Black Lives Matter, groups like these radical organizations calling for the overthrow of the United States or defund police or the overthrow of the United States and the establishment of La Raza, those types of groups, they're kind of like the main grassroots of the left. And I think there are people on the left trying to distance from them. You actually do see this. And we should be fair with this, right? So Nancy Pelosi, for example, she really does not like, publicly, she's made statements. She really doesn't seem to like Democratic Socialists of America. A lot of them are really trying to distance from the far, far left. Democrats like Senator Fetterman, John Fetterman, he criticizes that and he criticizes the other side. He's trying to be more of a moderate. He's very critical of the extreme left. And, good for him. I think what's happening with the Democrats right now is they're facing a really difficult point because Democratic Socialists of America is trying to organize to put their candidates to basically overtake the Democratic Party. And DSA actually does have involvement with some of this stuff. I was actually just reading, it's the book by Andy Ngo, right? He writes for the Post Millennial. He wrote a book called Unmasked. Interestingly, in his book, Andy Ngo writes, who is behind Antifa? Turns out it's actually not just an idea. It's actually an organized movement with a lot of organizations behind it. And they used to put the name of their organization on their signs. Do you know what some of those organization names were? Well, it turns out that in Rose City Antifa was organized by who? Democratic Socialists of America. That's going to be awkward when Trump investigates Antifa as a terrorist organization and goes after every single group and individual involved with them as terrorists. And so what you might actually see is the moderate Democrats finding this as a way to break away from the extremes. Because for a lot of them, a lot of people say, look, Trump used to be a Democrat, okay? Like, Trump used to be a Democrat. A lot of them say, I did not leave the Democrat Party left me. RFK Jr., he might still be a Democrat. You know what I mean? Joe Rogan used to identify more with that side, and I don't know where he stands now. You have a lot of people around Trump who used to identify as Democrats. This isn't just a Democrat-Republican thing. It is the problem. You've had a very radical group that does not represent the majority that's kind of overtaken the grassroots and who a lot of people don't identify with and don't even agree with. But because they act as the grassroots, the get out the vote stuff, the activism, the protests, the movements, it's really hard for them to break away from them. And they're reaching a point now where those crazies are kind of overtaking the main body. And so they're trying to deal with that, I don't think that all of them should be looped in with the extremes. I think most of them do not agree with it. And so you might actually see a lot of them try to distance themselves. And maybe that will be what happens. The other possibility is they link arms, and they say, you can't take us. And that's the other possibility. That also might happen. We'll have to see where it goes because, I mean, this is big. This is really big. Again, I don't think we've seen anything like this before. All right, folks. That said, if it's not obvious, I'm actually on the road right now. I have a lot of work I need to do, so I'm going to call it now. But stay tuned for more. We will not have an episode tomorrow. I have a conflict in schedule. I'm currently traveling, and I have to do some work tomorrow, and one of the interviews I have cannot work with the current schedule. So unfortunately, we can't do an episode tomorrow. But I will be back on Monday, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time, so stay tuned for more great content. That's it. In the meantime, what do you think? Do you think this is a good thing, a bad thing? Do you think this is going to be used against Trump after all of this? Do you think Trump has opened Pandora's box, and we're watching, I don't even know what this could lead to, something massive? Do you think it's too much? Do you agree with it? Let me know what you think. I want to hear your thoughts. That said, I'll see you again on Monday, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. In the meantime, please do not forget to like and share this video. Subscribe. In the meantime, folks, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free. Thank you.